There's a kind of calm that looks impressive from the outside. The voice is steady, the reactions are measured. You don't escalate, you don't make things difficult. And yet, somewhere in your body, you know that that calm is costing you something. A sense that life is well managed, but not really yours, and not really moving forward. What I want to talk about today is why that happens and why what we often call regulation, especially in somatics, is sometimes something else entirely. What most people call being regulated is actually learned inhibition. And that cost of inhibition, control, is paid first in the body, then in relationship dynamics, and then in life trajectory. Before I go further, one important orientation: insight and what I'm about to share won't land the same way in every nervous system. Holding the personal lens for your way your system organizes stress will change how you hear this, what you can apply, and how it sticks. So before you listen further, pause, go down to the description and take our short quiz. Get your personal report of your dominant pattern and then come back to continue. Everything we explore from here will feel a lot more personalized. Okay, here's what I'm naming the regulated performer: mature, healed, steady, and contained. This is one of the most socially rewarded patterns. When a pattern works socially, we stop questioning it. Some might even set it as the goal to aim for. This is someone whose nervous system learned, often early, that staying composed keeps things safe. They suppress their own truth and stabilize the emotional field around them. They don't fall apart, they don't explode, they hold. And because holding looks mature, thoughtful, and capable, it's reinforced as ideal. But over time, that reinforcement comes with consequences. Your range narrows. Choices start feeling constrained. Desires plateau or fizzle. And outcomes become just more of the same. And this isn't because you lack intelligence or care, but it's because your system might have learned to contain rather than to connect and coordinate. In the world of emotional social intelligence and somatic embodiment work, regulation has been misnamed. What often passes for calm is obedience, learned early, rewarded often, and then paid for quietly in the body for years. The regulated performer mistakes inhibition for regulation and calls the resulting numbness maturity. They suppress their own truth while stabilizing the emotional field around them, never accounting for what that labor costs their own body. Their voice stays even, the breath stays high, and they might even perform long, slow breaths without really ever releasing the diaphragm or lower abdomen. The jaw holds. If you've ever shaken up a bottle of carbonated water with a lid on, calm on the outside contains a lot of suppressed pressure on the inside. And nothing appears wrong until the cost accumulates. This will show up in health tells, fatigue that doesn't really resolve, inflammation without a cause, muted desire, high cortisol, trouble sleeping or turning off, but also trouble focusing and engaging meaningfully. Physiologically, the body is held in a constant state primed for action and then never completes it. The muscle tone becomes chronically tight rather than responsive. The diaphragm loses range. Breath stays shallow, not just from anxiety, but because deeper sensation has been trained as dangerous. Genuinely afraid of what would happen if they really let go. Hormone systems stay biased towards vigilance instead of cycles of repair. Recovery becomes inefficient. Creativity flattens. The body is burdened by this kind of suppression. And then there's the second half of the pattern. The regulated performer doesn't just restrain themselves in silo, they are leaders, lovers, and in dynamics with others who count on them. They hold rooms. They manage conversations. They absorb volatility so it doesn't spill. This is often praised as leadership or a great person who can be counted on. But emotionally stabilizing others is not free of cost. It requires constant attention to nuance, muscular containment, emotional hygiene, and low-grade environmental monitoring. Over time, the system internalizes a rule. It's safer to carry the weight than to share it. And that has relational consequences. If this is you, you might feel alone, even with others, unmet. Like you have everyone, but that same care being extended towards you, who has you? And so your system keeps bracing to keep the peace. Truth arrives filtered. Your anger arrives softened. Desire arrives negotiated. The bracing or compliance pattern of the regulated performer, found in our Becoming the Grand Formidable book, link below, has creative and financial consequences too. A body trained for containment cannot tolerate volatility. Expansion will feel off. Decisions that could require friction often get delayed or over-reasoned. Connection gets tabled because of the perception that others equal more pressure. The system is primed to assess risk, failure, and problems rather than being truly open to receive. And this is not a mindset issue. It is a nervous system and capacity issue. You might be running the pattern of a regulated performer, so try this experiment sometime. The next time you feel yourself staying composed in a moment that actually matters, a conversation, a decision, a creative edge, ask yourself one question. What am I containing right now in order to keep this steady? In other words, how do I believe I have to be in order for this situation to go well? Where are you holding that in your body? And then just scan. Notice what your body is organizing against. What would it be like to be free to drop that, shift it, or express that tension? That is where capacity wants to be built. You might be listening and say, yeah, well, that sounds good, but I can't just go off the rails here and explode on people. And I got you. Here's the part that usually gets missed. Most regulated performers aren't holding because they're afraid of their feelings. They're holding because they've seen what happens when things blow. They've watched a hard truth land badly and change a relationship permanently. They've seen emotion turn into a mess, reputations damaged, trust erodes, teams are destabilized. There are consequences. And maybe sometimes they were the one who exploded. And maybe sometimes they were the one who had to clean it up afterward. And so they learned something very rational. If I don't keep this contained, there will be fallout. And they're not wrong. Unfiltered expression has a cost. So does emotional discharge without timing, context, or capacity on the other side. So no, the alternative to the regulated performer is not just let it all out. That's not always brave. It's often just unskilled. But sidebar, it's only a matter of time before that unskilled explosion will come, and it usually comes out sideways. So if you don't learn to discharge well, just know it's coming. But when containment becomes the only move, the system never learns how to completely, intensely clean. So everything gets managed instead of metabolized. You don't explode, but you also don't resolve. And over time, your body will carry what that moment never did. And so the third option isn't suppression, and it isn't explosion. It's developing the capacity to stay online to the electrical charge long enough to let pressure organize into something precise that can be expressed well and with the mind and body honestly. This is why we believe in front-loading your training before the situation requires it, so that when you speak, it lands. When you set a boundary, it holds. When you act, there's no cleanup crew required afterward. That kind of expression doesn't create fallout, it reduces it, because it's not driven by overflow. It's driven by coordination of your system. And until a system knows it can do that, maintaining will always feel like the safer option. All right, so let's read thread all of this. What we often call regulation is sometimes inhibition, and that has been rewarded long enough to become invisible load for your system. True regulation is not the absence of intensity. It is the capacity to stay with it through its full cycle and return without self-betrayal. The nervous system doesn't suffer from too much truth. It suffers from truth that can't actually move through it. And pressure isn't the enemy. Pressure is your friend. It reveals. Under pressure, you don't rise to the occasion. You'll fall to your level of current training and capacity. The regulated performer tries never to fail, believing they can't afford to. And that's the mistake. This greater range between inhibition and true powerful regulation is not philosophical. It's trainable. The prestige exists as our practice ground for this kind of capacity training and more. It is our avant-garde somatic academy to build nervous systems that it can include edge, truth, and power without bracing or collapse, where regulation stops being a performance, how to behave better, and becomes an access point for coherence, even when you're challenged. If you want the simplest place to start, take the Somatics Skins quiz. If you'd like to go deeper, you can find our dyad of core curriculum linked in the description below, the Somatic Skins and Becoming the Grand Formidable. And if you're like, I've already done the books and the concepts, and you're speaking my language, where do I train? Consider joining us for a season at the Prestige, where we work with this and so much more in the world of applied somatics. Shoot us an email directly. I'll link it down below so that we can chat. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you. Please do consider liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel out a lot. Till next time.